I still remember the exact moment my heart shattered into a million pieces. The cruel smirk on Ethan's face, the dismissive flick of his wrist, and those words, those horrible, soul-crushing words that echoed in my mind for years afterward. "No one will want you, Ava. You should be grateful I even gave you a chance. 5 years of my life? 5 years given to a man who could discard me with such casual cruelty." I stood there in our apartment, his apartment that I had filled with my presence, my care, my love, surrounded by half-packed boxes of my belongings, frozen in disbelief. "What?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. Ethan didn't even look up from his phone as he repeated himself. I said, "No one else will want you. You're lucky I kept you around this long." I remember feeling dizzy, like the floor beneath me had suddenly tilted. The room seemed to contract and expand at the same time. This man, this stranger wearing my boyfriend's face, continued scrolling through his phone as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the center of my life. "Ethan, we've been together for 5 years, I said, my voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" He finally looked up then, annoyance flashing across his handsome features. That face that I'd once traced with my fingertips in the dark, memorizing every line and curve, now appeared foreign to me. "Look, Ava, it's been fun, but I've outgrown you. Simple as that. Natalie's moving in next weekend, so I need you out by Friday." Natalie, his 22-year-old intern. The one he'd sworn was just a colleague, when I'd noticed the late-night texts. The one he'd gaslit me about for months, making me feel paranoid and insecure. "You've been cheating on me?" The question was rhetorical. I already knew the answer. Ethan shrugged, a gesture so callous it made my stomach turn. Cheating is a strong word. I'd call it upgrading. 5 years together, and this was how it ended. Not with a difficult conversation filled with mutual tears and respect, but with this execution. Clinical, cold, cruel. "How long?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. "Does it matter?" he countered, but then sighed when he saw my expression. 3 months, if you must know. But honestly, Ava, I checked out of this relationship a long time ago. My mind raced back through recent memories. His birthday dinner I'd spent weeks planning, our weekend trip to the coast just last month, the family Christmas where he'd charmed my parents as always. Had it all been a lie? "Why didn't you just break up with me when you met her?" The question burst from me, raw and pained. This time, Ethan laughed, actually laughed. "And give up home-cooked meals and free housekeeping? Besides, you were convenient until I was sure about Natalie." Convenient? 5 years of love reduced to convenience. I felt something shift inside me then, a tectonic movement of my soul. The shock and hurt were still there, overwhelming and vast, but beneath them stirred something new, something hard and resolute. "You won't get away with treating people like this," I said quietly. His laugh was dismissive. "Get away with what? Breaking up?" "Last I checked, that's not a crime." He stood up, stretching lazily. "Look, I've got a dinner meeting. Just have your stuff out by Friday, okay?" As he grabbed his jacket, the charcoal cashmere one I'd given him for his last birthday, a thought occurred to me. "What about the money I loaned you for your business?" I asked. "Nearly $15,000 from my savings account, given freely to help him start his marketing consultancy 2 years ago. Consider it the price of your education," he said with that smirk I once found charming. Lesson 1, don't invest in relationships that have no future. The door closed behind him with a soft click that belied the violence of what had just happened. I stood in the sudden silence, my breathing shallow, my world imploding. "No one will want you." The words echoed in my head, reverberating, multiplying. I sank to the floor, my legs no longer able to support me. The first sob tore from my throat like something feral, a wounded animal sound that scared even me. Then came another, and another, until I was curled into myself, shaking with the force of my grief. Hours passed. Night fell. I remained on the floor, emptied of tears but still consumed by shock. My phone had lit up several times, concerned messages from my best friend Sophie, wondering why I'd missed our planned coffee date. I couldn't bring myself to answer, to make this nightmare real by putting it into words. When I finally moved, every muscle screamed in protest. I dragged myself to the bathroom, wincing at my reflection. Swollen eyes, blotchy skin, hair a tangled mess. I barely recognized myself, or perhaps more accurately, I was seeing myself through Ethan's eyes for the first time. "No one will want you." The words slithered through my mind again, poisonous and persistent. Was he right? Had I been deluding myself all this time? At 32, was I really as unwanted as he claimed? I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it momentarily clearing my head. As I reached for a towel, my gaze fell on Ethan's expensive skincare products, meticulously arranged on his side of the vanity. Products I had researched and purchased for him because he'd complained about early wrinkles. Products I'd paid for, like I'd paid for so many things in our relationship while he invested in his business. Something flared in me then. Not just anger, but indignation. How dare he? How dare he take, then discard me like I was nothing? I grabbed his $200 face serum and hurled it against the wall. The bottle shattered, the liquid oozing down the tile like blood. The sound of breaking glass was startlingly satisfying. But as I reached for his cologne, another gift from me, a different thought stopped me. This wasn't the answer. Destroying his things wouldn't hurt him. It would only confirm the image he had of me. Emotional, irrational, unwanted. If I was going to hurt Ethan, it needed to be methodical. It needed to strike at what he truly valued: his ego, his image, his sense of superiority, and most of all, his money. I carefully replaced the cologne, a plan already taking root in my mind. I wasn't sure yet what shape it would take, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Ethan Waters would rue the day he told me no one would want me. First, though, I needed to survive this night, and the next day, and the day after that. I needed to find somewhere to live, to gather what remained of my dignity along with my belongings. I picked up my phone and finally called Sophie. "Ava, where have you been? I was worried sick." Her familiar voice, warm with concern, almost broke me again. "He's been cheating," I said, my voice hollow. "He's kicking me out. I need a place to stay." To her credit, Sophie didn't waste time with platitudes or questions. "Pack a bag. I'm coming to get you in 30 minutes. You can stay with me as long as you need." After we hung up, I moved through the apartment like a ghost, gathering essentials for the next few days. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, important documents. I worked mechanically, trying not to think about the 5 years of accumulated life I would need to sort through. When Sophie arrived, she took one look at me and wrapped me in a fierce hug. I stood stiffly in her embrace, afraid that if I relaxed even a fraction, I would collapse again. "That absolute bastard," she whispered fiercely. "I never liked him." A weak laugh escaped me. "Yes, you did. Everyone did." Sophie pulled back, her eyes flashing. "Well, I was wrong. And so was everyone else." She picked up my bag. "Come on, let's get you out of here." As we left the apartment, the home I had helped create, the space that held 5 years of memories, I couldn't help looking back one last time. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This wasn't just about picking up the pieces. This was about proving Ethan wrong. This was about becoming someone so undeniably wanted, so thoroughly successful, that his words would choke him. "No one will want you?" We would see about that. The first week after the breakup passed in a blur of grief and logistical nightmares. Sophie's one-bedroom apartment wasn't designed for 2 people, but she made it work, insisting I take the bed while she slept on the couch. I protested weakly, but truth be told, I was grateful for her generosity. I was in no state to make decisions. By day, I went through the motions at my job as a mid-level marketing coordinator at a health food company, a position that had once seemed stable and satisfying, but now felt as hollow as everything else in my life. By night, I returned to Sophie's apartment and cycled through stages of grief, crying until I was empty, scrolling through old photos of Ethan and me until Sophie gently took my phone away, and occasionally, in my darker moments, drafting vengeful texts that I never sent. "You need to go back and get your things," Sophie reminded me on the 7th day. "Didn't he say you had to be out by Friday?" "That's tomorrow." The thought of returning to the apartment, possibly encountering Ethan or, worse, Natalie, made me physically ill. But Sophie was right. I couldn't leave 5 years of my life behind. "I'll come with you," she offered, her expression leaving no room for argument. "We'll go when he's at work." The next morning, armed with coffee and determination, Sophie drove me to the apartment I had once called home. My hands trembled as I inserted the key, half expecting it not to work, but the lock turned smoothly. The apartment was empty, thankfully, but evidence of changes was already visible. A woman's jacket I didn't recognize hung by the door. A different brand of wine, sweeter than anything Ethan or I would drink, sat open on the counter. "Let's be quick," Sophie said, squeezing my arm. We worked efficiently, boxing up my books, clothes, the few pieces of furniture that were truly mine. I moved through the space like an automaton, trying not to remember, trying not to feel. But when I entered the home office we had shared, where I had often worked late into the night helping Ethan with his business plans while neglecting my own career advancement, something caught my eye. A document lay open on his desk, partially covered by other papers. Normally, I would have respected his privacy, but something about the letterhead called to me. I moved closer, my heart beginning to race as I recognized the name of a major marketing firm, one that Ethan had been courting as a client for months. I shouldn't look, I told myself. It's not my business anymore. But then I remembered $15,000, my money invested in his dream. My nights and weekends sacrificed for his ambition. My contacts shared to boost his network. I pulled the document free, scanning its contents quickly. It was a contract, a massive one, the kind that would transform his fledgling consultancy into a serious player, the kind that would make him rich. The date on the contract was 3 weeks ago. He had known about this when he broke up with me. He had secured his financial future and then discarded me, the person who had helped make it possible. "Ava?" Sophie called from the bedroom. "You okay in there?" "Fine." I called back, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I quickly took a photo of the contract with my phone, then replaced it exactly as I had found it. Something had changed in me. The hurt was still there, the sense of betrayal still acute, but now there was something else too. A cold, clear purpose that cut through the fog of grief. Ethan had taken from me my time, my money, my love. And now that he was on the verge of success, he had cast me aside with those cruel words, "No one will want you." I would prove him wrong, not just by surviving this breakup, not just by moving on. No, I would show him exactly what he had thrown away. I would become more successful than he could imagine. And someday, somehow, I would make him regret every word, every lie, every betrayal. As Sophie and I loaded the last of my boxes into her car, my phone buzzed with a text. "Ethan. Left some stuff in the office drawer. We'll drop it at Sophie's this weekend." No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. Just a perfunctory message that assumed I would be available at his convenience. I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted his message and blocked his number. "Are you okay?" Sophie asked as we drove away, my life packed into her small car. "No," I answered honestly. "But I will be." The photo of Ethan's contract became my secret talisman in the weeks that followed. Whenever despair threatened to overtake me, I would look at it and remind myself, this is what he valued more than our relationship. This is what he thought worth lying for, cheating for. This is what I would surpass. I had always been good at my job, but I had never been ambitious in the way Ethan was. I had been content with steady progress, with security. Now, that complacency seemed like a luxury I could no longer afford. 2 weeks after moving in with Sophie, I found a small studio apartment I could just barely afford. It was nothing like the spacious place I had shared with Ethan, but it was mine. The day I moved in, Sophie helped me arrange my meager furniture, attempting to make the tiny space feel like home. "It's just temporary," I told her as we collapsed onto my secondhand couch, surveying the space. "Until I figure out my next move." "Which is?" she prompted, opening the bottle of wine we had bought to christen my new place. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to start my own business." Sophie's eyebrows shot up. "Wow, that's a big step, Ava." "I know." I accepted the glass she handed me. "But I've been thinking about it ever since. Well, since everything happened. I've spent years helping Ethan build his dream. Years sharing my ideas, my contacts, my strategies, all while staying safely in my comfortable corporate job." I took a sip of wine, the liquid warming me from within. "I know what works in marketing. I know what clients need. And more importantly, I know what Ethan doesn't offer that I could." Sophie studied me for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "This isn't just about proving something to him, is it?" The question stung because it hit so close to the truth. Of course, this was partly about Ethan, about proving him wrong, about becoming someone he would regret losing. But it was also about me, about the person I could be if I stopped playing it safe. "It's about both," I admitted. "I want to prove him wrong. I won't deny that. But I also want to prove myself right." Sophie nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm in. Whatever you need. Moral support, connections, someone to proofread your business plan at 2 a.m. I'm your girl." For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. "Thanks, Soph. I'm going to need it." The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since before the breakup. I opened my laptop and began researching what I would need to start my own marketing consultancy: business licenses, website domain, limited liability company formation. The practical aspects were daunting but straightforward. The bigger question was my niche. What could I offer that would set me apart? What did I know that others, including Ethan, didn't? As I worked through my regular job that day, the answer began to take shape. For years, I had specialized in marketing for wellness and health-focused brands. I understood their unique challenges, their audience, their values. Ethan's consultancy, by contrast, was generalist, taking any client who could pay, often delivering cookie-cutter strategies regardless of industry. I could focus exclusively on wellness brands. I could offer authentic, tailored marketing that understood the specifics of that world. And I already had connections, both from my current job and from the network I had helped Ethan build. That evening, I drafted a basic business plan. Zenith Marketing Consultancy, specialized services for wellness and health-conscious brands. I would start small, taking on projects I could handle outside my regular job hours. Over time, if things went well, I could transition to full-time. For the next month, I lived a double life. By day, I was still Ava Chen, dependable marketing coordinator. By night and weekend, I was building Zenith from scratch, designing a website, creating sample campaigns, drafting proposal templates. I also began subtly reaching out to contacts, not directly soliciting business yet, but re-establishing connections, letting people know I was exploring new opportunities. The response was encouraging. Several people immediately expressed interest in working with me directly, having always dealt with me anyway when they officially worked with Ethan's company. Of course, there were setbacks. Setting up the business bank account took 3 attempts due to paperwork issues. My first website design was a disaster that needed to be scrapped entirely. And juggling all this while maintaining my day job left me exhausted, often working until 2 a.m. only to wake at 6 for my regular job. But each small victory, each completed task, each positive response from a contact felt like a step away from that broken woman on Ethan's apartment floor. A step toward someone new, someone stronger. 6 weeks after the breakup, I landed my first client, a small organic skincare line looking to increase their social media presence. The project fee wasn't huge, but it was a start. I worked nights and weekends to deliver a campaign strategy that exceeded their expectations. This is exactly what we needed. The owner told me when I presented my final work, "No one has understood our brand voice this well before. No one will want you," Ethan had said. But here was someone who wanted my work, who valued my expertise. The skincare client referred me to a friend who ran a sustainable yoga clothing line. Another small project, another success. Word began to spread within the wellness community. By the 3rd month post-breakup, I was turning down projects because I couldn't handle them alongside my full-time job. "You need to make a decision," Sophie told me over dinner one night. "Zenith is taking off. You can't keep burning the candle at both ends." She was right. I was exhausted, running on caffeine and determination, but the thought of quitting my stable job terrified me. What if this early success was just luck? What if I failed? Then again, what if I didn't? The next day, browsing industry news over my lunch break, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Ethan's company had just announced a new division focused on wellness brands, my niche, my specialty. The accompanying photo showed Ethan, impeccably dressed in that cashmere jacket I'd bought him, standing proudly next to Natalie, now described as his partner in business and life. They looked polished, professional, perfect, and they were moving into my territory. My first reaction was panic. Ethan had resources I didn't have, connections I didn't have, the backing of his now successful main business. My second reaction was fury. Not content with taking my money, my time, my self-esteem, he was now encroaching on the one area I had carved out for myself. But my third reaction, the one that ultimately prevailed, was cold, clear determination. This wasn't a coincidence. Ethan must have heard about my fledgling business through mutual contacts. He was deliberately trying to crush me before I could become competition. He still saw me as someone he could easily overwhelm. Someone unwanted. Someone who should gratefully accept her place in his shadow. That night, I made my decision. I drafted my resignation letter, giving my employer 2 weeks' notice. It was time to bet on myself, fully and without reservation. The day after I submitted my resignation, I received an unexpected call from Lauren Diaz, founder of Pure Intentions, one of the fastest-growing organic food brands in the country. I had met her once at an industry event, introduced by none other than Ethan, who had been unsuccessfully trying to secure her business for months. "Ava? It's Lauren Diaz. I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I heard you've started your own consultancy." My heart pounded as I confirmed this was true. "Great. I've been watching your work with Serene Skin and Lotus Yoga Wear. Impressive results with modest budgets. That's exactly what we're looking for." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Lauren Diaz, whose company was valued at over $20 million, had been watching my work. "We're looking to overhaul our entire marketing strategy for the coming year," she continued. "Would you be interested in submitting a proposal?" Would I be interested? It was the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of client that could put Zenith firmly on the map. The kind of client that could transform my business overnight. The kind of client Ethan had been courting unsuccessfully for months. "I would be honored," I managed to say, my voice steady despite my racing thoughts. "When would you like to meet to discuss your needs?" We arranged a meeting for the following week. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes before calling Sophie, who shrieked with excitement when I told her the news. "Do you realize what this means?" she demanded. "This is huge, Ava! This is your moment!" She was right. This was my chance to prove, to myself as much as to Ethan, that I was wanted, that I was valuable, that I was capable of success on my own terms. For the next week, I poured everything into preparing for that meeting. I researched Pure Intentions exhaustively, analyzing their current marketing, their competitors, their audience. I developed a preliminary strategy that would highlight what set them apart, while addressing the weaknesses in their current approach. The day of the meeting, I dressed carefully in a new outfit I had splurged on, a sleek, professional pantsuit in deep teal that made me feel powerful, confident. As I made final adjustments to my presentation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you're meeting with Lauren today. Don't embarrass yourself. She needs professional help, not amateur hour." My hand shook, partly with rage, partly with hurt. How had he found out? How had he gotten my new number? And more importantly, how dare he try to undermine my confidence right before the most important meeting of my career? For a moment, I was that broken woman on his apartment floor again, believing his cruel assessment of my worth. But only for a moment. I deleted the message without replying and blocked the number. Then I gathered my materials, straightened my shoulders, and headed to the meeting that would change everything. Lauren Diaz was even more impressive in person than her reputation suggested, sharp, articulate, with a clear vision for her company. She listened attentively as I presented my analysis and preliminary ideas, occasionally nodding or asking incisive questions. When I finished, she studied me thoughtfully before speaking. "Your approach is refreshingly different, Ava. Most consultants try to make us like every other wellness brand out there. You're suggesting we lean harder into what makes us unique. That's because what makes you unique is also what makes you valuable," I replied. "Pure Intentions has always prioritized transparency and education alongside quality. That's not a liability to be smoothed over. It's your greatest asset." Lauren smiled. "Ethan Waters pitched us last month. Slick presentation, lots of buzzwords." But when I asked him what set Pure Intentions apart from our competitors, he talked about packaging and influencer strategies. He didn't once mention our core values. I kept my expression neutral at the mention of Ethan's name, but inside, a small flame of satisfaction flickered to life. "Values are the foundation of authentic marketing," I said, "especially in the wellness space, where consumers are increasingly savvy about distinguishing between genuine commitment and greenwashing. You can't just look the part, you have to be the part." By the end of the meeting, Lauren had not only agreed to hire Zenith for the strategy overhaul, but had also suggested a monthly retainer for ongoing consultation. The contract would be worth more than I had made in the past year at my corporate job. As we shook hands to conclude our meeting, Lauren said something that I would remember for a long time afterward. "I'm glad we found you, Ava. You're exactly what we've been looking for. You're exactly what we've been looking for. No one will want you." I left the meeting walking on air, Lauren's words echoing in my mind, gradually drowning out Ethan's cruel dismissal. Someone did want me, my expertise, my perspective, my work, and not just someone, but one of the most respected names in the industry. This was just the beginning. The Pure Intentions contract changed everything. With a major client secured and a steady monthly income guaranteed, I could finally focus all my energy on Zenith. My last day at my corporate job felt like shedding an old skin, slightly scary but ultimately liberating. I rented a small office space, nothing fancy, but a step up from working out of my studio apartment. I hired a part-time virtual assistant to help with administrative tasks. And most importantly, I began to build a portfolio of clients who valued exactly what I offered: authentic, values-driven marketing for wellness brands. 6 months after Ethan had told me no one would want me, Zenith Marketing Consultancy was thriving. I had 8 regular clients, ranging from small startups to established brands like Pure Intentions. My work was being recognized in industry publications. I was even approached about speaking at a marketing conference. But success, while sweet, didn't heal all wounds. Every time I saw Ethan's company mentioned in industry news, every time I heard his name from mutual contacts, I felt that familiar twist of pain and anger. He had moved on, seemingly without consequence, building his business with Natalie by his side, enjoying the fruits of success that I had helped plant the seeds for. The $15,000 he had never repaid still rankled. Not because of the money itself, I was earning well enough now that the amount no longer seemed as significant, but because of what it represented. His entitlement, his belief that he could take from me without consequence. "No one will want you. You should be grateful I even gave you a chance." Why did those words still have the power to hurt me, even months later? Even as evidence mounted daily that he had been wrong? "You need closure," Sophie suggested one evening as we shared a bottle of wine at my new office, celebrating a successful campaign launch for one of my clients. "You've proven him wrong professionally. Maybe it's time to confront him personally." I shook my head. "What would be the point? He's incapable of genuine remorse. He'd just twist it to make himself the victim somehow." Sophie studied me over the rim of her glass. "Then maybe this isn't about getting an apology from him. Maybe it's about you reclaiming your power." "I have reclaimed my power," I insisted, gesturing around the office. "Zenith is successful. I'm doing well." "Professionally, yes," Sophie agreed. "But emotionally? You still flinch when his name comes up. You still check his company's social media even though you pretend you don't." I winced, caught out. She wasn't wrong. Despite my success, I hadn't fully moved on. Something still tethered me to the past, to the hurt, to him. "So what's your suggestion?" I asked. "Confront him in some dramatic showdown?" "That's not my style," Sophie shrugged. "I don't know what the answer is. I just know that success is the best revenge only if you actually feel it. Only if you can enjoy it without his shadow hanging over you." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Was I truly enjoying my success, or was I still measuring it against Ethan's? Was I building Zenith for myself, or was I building it to prove him wrong? The next morning, scrolling through industry news with my coffee, I saw something that made me pause mid-sip. Ethan's company was hosting a major marketing symposium next month, a gathering of wellness industry leaders to discuss emerging trends. The kind of event designed to position his firm as a thought leader in the space. My space. The wellness niche I had carved out for myself, that I had expertise in long before he decided to expand into it. And there, listed among the speakers, was his name alongside Natalie's. Power couple. Success story. While I remained invisible, despite my growing reputation in the field, an idea began to take shape in my mind. Not a confrontation exactly, but a reclaiming. A way to step out of Ethan's shadow once and for all. I picked up my phone and called Lauren Diaz. "Lauren, it's Ava Chen. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all, Ava. What can I do for you?" I took a deep breath. "I'm calling about the Wellness Marketing Symposium next month. I noticed you're listed as an attendee." "Yes, we always try to have representation at these industry events. Though between us, I'm not thrilled it's being hosted by Waters Consulting. Their wellness division seems more opportunistic than knowledgeable." I smiled to myself. Lauren didn't miss much. "That's actually why I'm calling. I think the symposium would benefit from a different perspective, from someone who's worked exclusively in wellness marketing, who understands the unique challenges and opportunities in this space." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you suggesting yourself as a speaker, Ava?" "I am," I confirmed, my heart racing. The current lineup is heavily skewed toward general marketing principles applied to wellness, rather than specialized wellness marketing expertise. I think attendees would value a more targeted approach. Another pause, longer this time. "You know, you're right. And as one of the major sponsors of the event, Pure Intentions does have some influence over the speaker lineup. I could hear the smile in her voice as she continued. Let me make some calls. I think it's time the industry heard from a true expert. By that afternoon, it was official. I had been added to the symposium speaker lineup, not as a panelist, but as the keynote presenter. When the updated event announcement went live the next day, my phone blew up with congratulatory messages from clients and industry contacts. But there was one message I was waiting for that never came. Ethan maintained radio silence, though I knew he must have seen the news. For the next 3 weeks, I prepared meticulously for my keynote. This wasn't just another presentation. This was my declaration of independence, my official emergence from Ethan's shadow. My content needed to be not just good, but undeniably superior, insightful, actionable, and authentic in a way his work never was. I slept little, worked constantly, and refined my presentation until every slide, every word was perfect. By the evening before the symposium, I was exhausted but ready. More than ready. I was hungry for this moment. The morning of the symposium dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself approved of what was about to happen. I dressed carefully in a power suit, crimson this time, bold and unapologetic. I wanted to be visible. I wanted to be remembered. As my Uber approached the downtown hotel hosting the event, I felt a flutter of nerves. Not fear exactly, but anticipation. Would he be there when I arrived? Would we come face to face before my presentation? What would I say if we did? The hotel lobby was already buzzing with attendees when I arrived. I checked in at the speaker registration desk, collected my badge, and scanned the crowd, both dreading and hoping to see that familiar face. Instead, I saw Lauren Diaz, who waved me over with a warm smile. Ava! Perfect timing. I was just telling these gentlemen about the amazing work you've done for Pure Intentions. The gentlemen turned out to be representatives from Vital Harvest, one of the largest natural food conglomerates in the country. I shook hands, made small talk, and tried to focus on the conversation despite my hyper-awareness of every person entering the lobby. We've been impressed with the Pure Intentions rebrand, one of the Vital Harvest executives said. Fresh without being trendy. Authentic without being preachy. Exactly the balance we've been trying to strike. Ava understands that wellness marketing isn't about glossy images and buzzwords, Lauren said, her tone proud. It's about connecting values to action. We exchanged business cards with promises to connect after the symposium. As they moved away, Lauren squeezed my arm encouragingly. Nervous about your keynote? A little, I admitted. It's a big audience. You'll be brilliant, she assured me. Just be yourself. That's what makes your work stand out. Be myself. The advice was so simple, yet so profound. For years with Ethan, I had gradually diminished myself, my ideas, my needs, my ambitions, to accommodate his larger-than-life presence. Even in building Zenith, I had been partly reacting to him, defining myself in opposition to what he had done to me. But today wasn't about Ethan. It was about me. About my expertise, my vision, my voice. With that realization, a curious calm settled over me. Whatever happened today, whether I saw Ethan or not, whether my keynote was well received or not, I had already won the most important battle. I had reclaimed myself. As I headed toward the main conference room where the opening sessions would be held, a familiar laugh stopped me in my tracks. I turned slowly to see Ethan holding court in the center of a small group, Natalie at his side. He hadn't seen me yet, too engrossed in whatever story he was telling, probably taking credit for someone else's idea, as was his habit. For a moment, I considered avoiding him, slipping into the conference room unnoticed. But then I remembered, I had nothing to hide, nothing to be ashamed of. I was a legitimate expert, invited to give the keynote address based on my own merits. I straightened my shoulders and walked directly toward the group, not with confrontation in mind, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their own worth. Ethan saw me when I was about 10 feet away. I watched the expressions flicker across his face, surprise, discomfort, and then a hasty rearrangement into his professional smile. But I caught it, that momentary uncertainty. That recognition that things were not as he had expected them to be. Ava, he said, his voice carrying just the right note of casual greeting, as if we were distant acquaintances rather than former partners of 5 years. I heard you were speaking today. Congratulations. Natalie looked between us, her smile fixed but her eyes watchful. She was younger than me, pretty in an obvious way, with the slightly anxious air of someone trying very hard to appear confident. I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for her. She didn't know what she had gotten herself into. "Thank you, Ethan," I replied, my voice steady and pleasant. "I'm looking forward to sharing my perspective on authentic wellness marketing. It's been the focus of my work for years, after all." A subtle reminder that this had been my specialty long before he decided to expand into it. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, well, it's certainly a growing field. Lots of room for different approaches." He placed his hand possessively on Natalie's lower back. "Natalie here has brought some fresh ideas to our wellness division. We're seeing excellent results." I smiled at Natalie directly, woman to woman. "That's wonderful. The industry benefits from new voices and perspectives." I extended my hand to her. "We haven't been formally introduced. I'm Ava Chen." She took my hand, her grip firmer than I expected. "Natalie Winters. I've heard a lot about you." "I bet you have," I thought, but kept my expression friendly. "All good things, I hope?" An awkward pause followed, during which Ethan seemed to be calculating his next move. I saved him the trouble. "If you'll excuse me, I should check in with the event coordinator before the sessions begin. Enjoy the symposium." I nodded to the group at large, then to Ethan specifically. "I look forward to hearing your panel discussion later." As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in months. The encounter I had dreaded for so long had passed without drama, without tears, without me diminishing myself in any way. I had faced Ethan as an equal. No, as someone who had surpassed him in the very field he was trying to conquer. The opening sessions of the symposium passed in a blur of networking and note-taking. I participated actively, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights when appropriate, establishing myself as a knowledgeable presence even before my keynote. Ethan and Natalie's panel was scheduled right before lunch. I sat in the audience, watching as they presented their innovative approach to wellness marketing. An approach that, to my expert ear, sounded suspiciously like a repackaging of general marketing principles with wellness buzzwords sprinkled on top. There was no depth to their analysis, no real understanding of what made wellness consumers different, no authentic connection to the values that drove this industry. It was all surface, all style over substance. The audience seemed to sense it too. The questions afterward were probing, sometimes skeptical. I didn't need to say a word. The contrast between their approach and mine would speak for itself when I took the stage later. My keynote was scheduled as the final presentation of the day, the spot reserved for the most anticipated speaker. As the time approached, I reviewed my notes one last time in a quiet corner of the hotel's business center. "Nervous?" a voice asked, and I looked up to see Lauren Diaz. "Focused," I corrected with a smile. She nodded approvingly. "Good. By the way, the Vital Harvest executives were impressed with you this morning. They're looking for a marketing partner for their new line of plant-based proteins." My eyes widened. Vital Harvest was easily 10 times the size of Pure Intentions. A contract with them would catapult Zenith into the big leagues. "They'll be watching your keynote carefully," Lauren added. "Just thought you should know what's at stake," as if I needed more pressure. But strangely, the news didn't rattle me. Instead, it crystallized my resolve. This was my moment to shine, to show not just Ethan, but the entire industry what I was capable of. When I finally took the stage at 4 p.m., the main conference room was packed. From my position at the podium, I could see Ethan and Natalie seated near the back, not quite willing to skip the keynote, but not wanting to give me the satisfaction of their full attention either. The Vital Harvest executives were in the front row, along with Lauren and representatives from several other major wellness brands. This was, without exaggeration, the most important audience I had ever addressed. I took a deep breath and began. Authentic marketing begins with a simple question: what truth are you serving? For the next 45 minutes, I laid out my philosophy of wellness marketing, not as a set of tactics or trends, but as a fundamental approach rooted in values alignment and genuine commitment to consumer well-being. I shared case studies from my work, demonstrating how this approach had driven measurable results for brands of all sizes. I didn't use jargon. I didn't rely on flashy visuals. I simply spoke the truth as I understood it, with the confidence of someone who had lived and breathed this industry for years. The audience was with me every step of the way. They nodded. They took notes. They laughed at my occasional moments of dry humor. And when I opened the floor for questions, hands shot up throughout the room. The Q&A session could have continued well past the allocated time, but the moderator eventually had to cut it off. As I gathered my materials, people surged forward to introduce themselves, to exchange cards, to request meetings. Among them were the Vital Harvest executives who didn't bother with subtlety. "We need to talk," their chief marketing officer said, pressing his card into my hand. "Tomorrow, if possible." I agreed to a breakfast meeting, trying to maintain my professional composure while internally doing cartwheels of joy. As the crowd around me gradually thinned, I caught sight of Ethan near the exit. Our eyes met briefly across the room. His expression was unreadable, but he nodded once, a grudging acknowledgement, before turning away. That small gesture shouldn't have mattered. After everything that had happened, after all I had achieved, Ethan's approval or recognition should have been irrelevant. But I was human, and there was a part of me, a small, wounded part, that had needed that moment. Not because I still cared what he thought, but because it represented a final closing of a chapter. The story of Ava and Ethan was truly over. The story of just Ava was well underway. The symposium concluded with a networking reception. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, discussing potential collaborations, building connections that would serve Zenith well in the months and years to come. I was engaged in conversation with a group of industry leaders when I felt a presence at my elbow. Turning, I found myself face to face with Natalie. "That was an impressive presentation," she said, her expression guarded but her tone sincere. "I learned a lot." Up close, without Ethan hovering nearby, she seemed younger, less certain. I wondered what he had told her about me, about our relationship, about its end. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely appreciating the professional courtesy she was extending. "It's a subject I'm passionate about." She nodded, glancing around as if to ensure Ethan wasn't within earshot. "Can I ask you something? Off the record?" Curiosity piqued, I excused myself from the group and moved with her to a quieter corner of the reception hall. "What's on your mind?" Natalie fidgeted with her event badge. "How did you do it? Build your own consultancy so quickly, I mean. Establish yourself as an expert. It's impressive." The question surprised me. This wasn't what I had expected, perhaps accusations or defensiveness, or some message from Ethan. But professional curiosity? That I hadn't anticipated. "Hard work," I answered honestly, "specialized knowledge, and a genuine belief in what I'm doing. It's not just business for me, it's a values alignment." She absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. "Ethan says the wellness angle is just a trend, that we should be positioning ourselves to move on to the next big thing once it peaks." Of course he did. Ethan had always been about chasing the next opportunity, the next trend, the next conquest, in business as in his personal life. "The wellness industry isn't a trend," I said carefully. "It's a fundamental shift in how consumers view their relationship with products and services. It's about health, yes, but also about values, ethics, sustainability. Those concerns aren't going away." Natalie nodded slowly. "That's what I thought too. But Ethan..." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "Anyway, I just wanted to say I admired your presentation. And maybe..." She hesitated, then pulled out her own business card. "Maybe we could talk sometime. Professionally, I mean. I'd like to understand your approach better." I accepted her card, oddly touched by the gesture. Whatever was happening between her and Ethan, and I sensed trouble in paradise already, she was trying to forge her own path, to learn, to grow. "I'd be happy to," I told her and meant it. "Call me anytime." As Natalie walked away, I caught sight of Ethan watching us from across the room, his expression darkening when he saw his girlfriend and his ex exchanging contact information. For the first time, I recognized the emotion on his face for what it was: fear. Not fear of losing Natalie to me as a friend, but fear of losing control. Fear that the narrative he had constructed, where he was the success story and I was the disposable ex, was crumbling in real time. "No one will want you," he had told me all those months ago. But he had been wrong. Clients wanted me. Industry leaders wanted me. Even his new girlfriend wanted my mentorship. And in that moment, watching him realize this, I finally felt free of the power those cruel words had held over me. The next morning, my breakfast meeting with Vital Harvest resulted in a preliminary agreement that would make them Zenith's largest client to date. By the time I boarded my flight home that afternoon, I had 5 new potential clients in my pipeline and an invitation to speak at another major industry conference. As the plane took off, I gazed out the window at the city below, growing smaller with each passing second. Somewhere down there was Ethan, continuing his life, perhaps already spinning the events of the symposium to preserve his ego. But I was rising above it all, literally and figuratively. The future stretched before me, bright with possibility. I had proven Ethan wrong in the most complete way possible, by becoming someone undeniably wanted, undeniably valuable, undeniably successful. And I was just getting started. 1 year after Ethan had cruelly dismissed me from his life, Zenith Marketing Consultancy was no longer a fledgling business operating out of a tiny office. We, because it was we, now not just me, occupied the entire top floor of a renovated historic building downtown. My team had grown to include 5 full-time employees and a network of trusted freelancers. Our client roster featured some of the most respected names in the wellness industry. The Vital Harvest contract had indeed been the game changer I'd hoped for. Their plant-based protein line, marketed with Zenith's authentic wellness approach, had exceeded sales projections by 40% in its first quarter. Other major brands had taken notice, and soon we were turning away more business than we accepted. Success, as they say, is the best revenge. But revenge had ceased to be my motivation months ago. Somewhere along the way, building Zenith had transformed from a reaction to Ethan's cruelty into a mission of its own, creating authentic marketing that actually served consumers while helping brands with genuine value propositions succeed. I still thought about Ethan occasionally, but the sharp pain of betrayal had dulled to a distant ache, a lesson learned rather than a wound still bleeding. I heard about him through industry channels. His company was doing well, though his wellness division had never quite gained the traction he'd hoped for. He and Natalie were still together, at least publicly. Natalie and I had met for coffee a few times after the symposium. She was smarter than I'd initially given her credit for, with good instincts for marketing if not much experience. She never directly discussed her relationship with Ethan, and I never asked, but I sensed a growing disillusionment in her occasional comments, her careful questions about building her own professional identity separate from his. I recognized the pattern, having lived it myself. I could only hope she would find her way out before investing 5 years of her life as I had. On the anniversary of our breakup, a date I hadn't consciously marked but nonetheless found myself aware of, I was working late in my office, reviewing proposals for the coming quarter. Sophie, now Zenith's operations director, a natural fit for her organizational skills and straight-talking style, had left hours ago, insisting I shouldn't stay too late either. "You built this company to have a better life, not to work yourself to death," she had reminded me on her way out. She wasn't wrong. Despite my success, or perhaps because of it, I had fallen into the habit of overworking. There was always one more email to answer, one more proposal to refine, one more strategy to consider. The workaholic tendencies I had once channeled into helping Ethan build his business had been redirected toward Zenith. The difference, of course, was that this was my dream, my creation. But Sophie's point remained valid. What was the purpose of success if I never took time to enjoy it? I was contemplating this question, staring out at the city lights from my office window, when my phone buzzed with a text message. The name on the screen made my heart stutter. Ethan. We hadn't communicated directly since the symposium a year ago. I had heard he was upset about losing the Vital Harvest account to me, an account he had been pursuing for months, but he had never reached out. Until now. I hesitated before opening the message, bracing myself for whatever it might contain. Had something happened? Was this some kind of emergency? Or just another attempt to undermine my confidence? Heard about your feature in Marketing Innovators. Impressive. Never doubted you had it in you. Drink sometime to catch up? For old time's sake. I read the message twice, trying to decipher its true intent. The compliment seemed genuine enough, but that last part, drinks for old time's sake, set alarm bells ringing. What was he really after? As I pondered my response, another text came through, this time from Natalie's number. Please ignore Ethan's text. He's drunk and I've taken his phone. Sorry for the intrusion. A moment later, a third message. Also, congratulations on the Marketing Innovators feature. Well deserved. I smiled despite myself. Poor Natalie. Still managing Ethan's messes, just as I once had. But at least she had the sense to intervene before he could do real damage. I decided to respond to her, but not to him. Thanks, Natalie. No harm done. Hope all is well with you. Her reply came quickly, as well as can be expected. Would you have time for coffee next week? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Curiosity piqued, I agreed to meet her the following Tuesday at a quiet cafe halfway between our respective offices. After confirming the details, I put my phone away and returned to my work, but my concentration was shot. What did Natalie want to discuss? And what had prompted Ethan's unexpected outreach? The Marketing Innovators feature had been published weeks ago, a profile highlighting Zenith's rapid growth and innovative approach. Why reach out now? I pushed the questions aside. Whatever game Ethan might be playing, I was no longer a willing participant. And whatever Natalie wanted to discuss, I would hear her out as a professional courtesy, nothing more. The weekend passed in a blur of social obligations I had been neglecting: brunch with friends, a visit to my parents, even a tentative first date with a man Sophie had introduced me to. My life outside of Zenith was finally beginning to take shape again, after a year focused almost exclusively on building my business. By Tuesday morning, I had almost forgotten about the scheduled coffee with Natalie. A last-minute reminder on my phone sent me rushing from a client meeting to the cafe, arriving 5 minutes late to find her already seated at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee waiting. "Hope you still take it with just milk," she said by way of greeting, pushing 1 cup toward me as I sat down. "I do, thanks." I studied her as I took my first sip. She looked tired, the carefully applied makeup not quite concealing the shadows under her eyes. Her posture was tense, her smile strained. "Everything okay?" Natalie glanced around the cafe as if checking that no one was within earshot before leaning forward. "I'm leaving Ethan, both personally and professionally." The blunt announcement caught me off guard. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said automatically, then clarified, "about the personal part at least. The professional part might be a good move." A small, genuine smile briefly lit her features. "Always direct. I've admired that about you." She took a deep breath. "I'm starting my own consultancy. Nothing that would compete directly with Zenith," she hastened to add. "I'm focusing on sustainability communications for fashion brands." "That's a good niche," I acknowledged. "Growing market, not many specialized consultants serving it yet." Natalie nodded. "Exactly. I've been developing it as a side project for months. Ethan didn't know until yesterday." Her expression clouded. "That's when he found my business plan." "That's why he texted you." "He was angry, said I was pulling an Ava." I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped me. "Pulling an Ava? Is that what he calls it when women recognize their own value and act accordingly?" "Apparently," Natalie confirmed, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "He accused me of betraying him, said I'd learned nothing from watching what happened with you." I raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly does he think happened with me?" "His version? You got lucky. Caught a break with pure intentions because Lauren Diaz had some grudge against him. Built a business riding on his reputation and contacts." She shook her head. "It's total nonsense, of course. I've seen you work. I know better." The casual dismissal of what I had built should have angered me, but instead I felt an odd sense of pity for Ethan. How small his world must be, how fragile his ego to need such delusions. "So what happens now?" I asked, returning to Natalie's situation. "You've told him you're leaving?" "Yes." "It didn't go well." She absently rubbed her wrist, and I noticed a faint bruise forming there. My expression must have changed, because she quickly pulled her sleeve down. "It's nothing. He grabbed my arm when I was trying to leave. He's never done anything like that before." "Natalie," I said carefully, "that's not nothing." She avoided my gaze. "I know. That's why I left immediately. I'm staying with a friend." She looked up, her expression suddenly vulnerable. "The thing is, I don't have much savings. Ethan managed most of our finances. And I have a non-compete clause in my employment contract." Now we were getting to the real purpose of this meeting. "Let me guess. You need legal advice about breaking the non-compete, and possibly a loan to get your business started." Natalie flushed. "I wouldn't ask, but you're the only person I know who's successfully done what I'm trying to do, who understands what I'm up against with Ethan." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm not looking for charity. I'll pay back every cent with interest, and I can offer sweat equity, helping with Zenith projects until the loan is repaid." I considered her proposal. On the surface, it made little business sense. Why help a potential future competitor? Why risk Ethan's anger by aiding his girlfriend's exit? But there was something compelling about Natalie's determination, her willingness to start over. I recognized in her the same fire that had driven me a year ago, the need to prove herself, to build something of her own. And perhaps, a small voice whispered, this was the perfect completion of my own journey away from Ethan's influence. Not just succeeding myself, but helping another woman escape his orbit and find her own success. "I won't loan you money directly," I said finally. "That creates complications neither of us needs. But I can offer you a 6-month contract position with Zenith. Real work, real pay." Enough to build your savings while you sort out the legal issues with your non-compete. Natalie's eyes widened. You would do that? Even knowing it might provoke Ethan? I smiled. Especially knowing that. Then, more seriously, your work will need to be excellent. I'm not hiring you to spite Ethan. I'm hiring you because I think you have potential. Don't make me regret it. I won't, she promised, relief and determination mingling in her expression. Thank you, Ava. I know how awkward this must be. I shrugged. Less than you might think? What happened between Ethan and me was a year ago. I've moved on. I paused, then added, but I do have one condition. Name it. See a lawyer about that non-compete immediately? And if he ever puts his hands on you again, file a police report. No exceptions. Natalie nodded solemnly. Already on it. I have a consultation with an attorney tomorrow. We spent the rest of our coffee discussing practical details, when she could start at Zenith, what projects she might work on, how to handle the inevitable industry gossip when news broke that Ethan's girlfriend was now working for his ex. As we parted ways outside the cafe, Natalie surprised me with a quick, awkward hug. You know what the worst part is? She said quietly. I actually believed him when he said no one else would want you. I thought he must have had good reasons for ending things. She stepped back, shaking her head. I was so wrong. And now he's saying the same things to me. A chill ran through me at the pattern she described. How many women had Ethan torn down with those exact words? How many had believed him? He's wrong about you too, I told her firmly. And you're going to prove it just like I did. As I walked back to my office, I felt a curious sense of closure. The circle that had begun with Ethan's cruel dismissal was completed now, not with revenge, but with something more powerful, breaking the cycle, helping another woman escape the same trap. No one will want you, he had said, but he had been wrong. Clients wanted me, the industry wanted me, my team wanted my leadership, and now, in a twist I could never have predicted, even his girlfriend wanted my mentorship. The ultimate revenge wasn't in proving Ethan wrong, though I had certainly done that. The ultimate revenge was in no longer caring whether he was right or wrong, in building a life so full of purpose and success that his opinion had become irrelevant. As I stepped into the Zenith offices, my offices, I was greeted by the hum of productive activity, the sight of my team engaged in work they believed in. This was what mattered now. This was what I had built from the ashes of that devastating breakup, and it was just the beginning. 6 months after hiring Natalie, Zenith had expanded again. We had moved beyond traditional marketing consultancy into broader brand strategy, helping wellness companies align their entire business operations with their stated values. It was challenging, fulfilling work that made a tangible difference, not just in market share and profits, but in how companies treated their employees, sourced their materials, and interacted with their communities. Natalie had proven herself to be an excellent addition to the team. Her background in fashion gave us insights into a tangential industry that complemented our wellness focus, especially as the two sectors increasingly overlapped in the athleisure and sustainable clothing markets. By the end of her contract period, I had offered her a permanent position as our Sustainability Communications Director. She had declined, gently but firmly. I need to build something of my own, she explained, but I'd love to maintain a strategic partnership between our firms. I respected her decision. I, of all people, understood the drive to create something that belonged entirely to you. We had arranged a collaboration framework that would allow her new consultancy, Conscious Style Communications, to partner with Zenith on projects that required both our specialties. As for Ethan, he had reacted exactly as expected to Natalie's departure, first with attempts to woo her back, then with threats about her non-compete, and finally with a smear campaign within our industry circles, suggesting she had stolen client information before leaving. None of it had stuck. Natalie had been meticulous about documentation, had consulted with lawyers at every step, and had built enough genuine relationships in the industry that Ethan's accusations were met with skepticism rather than concern. His wellness division had floundered after losing her, eventually being folded back into his main business with little fanfare. I heard through industry channels that he had moved on to attempting to establish himself in the tech marketing sector, always chasing the next trend, never building anything lasting. My own life had found a balance I wouldn't have thought possible in those dark days after our breakup. Zenith continued to thrive, but I had learned to delegate, to trust my team, to step away from work at reasonable hours. I had even begun dating seriously, a kind, thoughtful architect named Michael who understood ambition but also valued connection outside of work. On a crisp autumn evening, almost 18 months after Ethan had told me no one would want me, I found myself addressing a graduating class of marketing students at the local university. The department chair had invited me to speak about entrepreneurship and authentic branding, a full-circle moment that wasn't lost on me. The most valuable asset in marketing isn't a clever tagline or a viral campaign, I told the sea of eager young faces before me. It's the courage to stand for something real, to align your work with values that matter, to say no to clients or strategies that compromise those values. I scanned the audience, remembering myself at their age, full of potential but lacking confidence, unsure of my place in the world. You will face setbacks. You will encounter people who underestimate you, who tell you that you aren't enough, that you should be grateful for whatever scraps of opportunity or recognition they deign to offer you. The room was utterly silent, every student leaning forward slightly, absorbing my words. When that happens, and it will, remember this: their limitations are not your reality. Their fear of your potential is not a true reflection of what you can achieve. After the speech, as students lined up to ask questions or share their aspirations, I noticed a familiar figure lingering at the back of the auditorium: Ethan. He hadn't approached, hadn't tried to speak to me, had simply watched my presentation from a distance. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded room. For a moment, I was transported back to that devastating day in his apartment, hearing those cruel words, feeling my world collapse. But the feeling passed quickly, replaced by a calm certainty. I had nothing to prove to him anymore. Not my worth, not my success, not my happiness. I gave him a small, professional nod, the kind you might offer a distant acquaintance or former colleague, then turned my attention back to the student asking me about internship opportunities at Zenith. By the time I had finished speaking with the last student, Ethan was gone. I might have thought I'd imagined his presence if not for the text that appeared on my phone as I walked to my car. Impressive speech. You've done well for yourself. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about how things ended. 18 months ago, those words would have meant everything to me. I would have analyzed them endlessly, searching for true remorse, for validation, for some indication that he finally saw my worth. Now they were just words on a screen. Too little, too late, and ultimately beside the point. My finger hovered over the delete button, but instead, I found myself typing a reply. Thank you for your message. I hope you find what you're looking for. Simple. Final. Free of both rancor and attachment. I sent the text, then deleted our conversation thread entirely. As I drove home that evening, to the beautiful riverside apartment I had purchased with my own money, earned through my own business, built on my own vision, I felt a sense of peace that had been long in coming. No one will want you. Those words, once so devastating, now seemed almost laughable in their inaccuracy. I was wanted, as an expert, as a mentor, as a partner, as a friend, not because I had proven Ethan wrong, but because I had finally, fully believed in my own worth. The next morning, I woke to news that would cement Zenith's position as a leading force in wellness marketing. Pure Intentions, our first major client, was being acquired by an international conglomerate, and they wanted Zenith to handle the global rebranding, a contract worth millions. We wouldn't trust anyone else with this transition. Lauren Diaz told me over the phone. You understand our values better than anyone. You helped define them. As I hung up, I couldn't help but smile at the symmetry of it all. The journey that had begun with devastating loss had led to this moment of extraordinary gain. Not just financial success, but the deeper satisfaction of doing work that mattered, that aligned with my values, that actually made a difference. In the 18 months since Ethan had laughed that no one would want me, I had become not just a millionaire through my own business, but something far more valuable, a woman who knew her worth was not determined by anyone else's assessment. And that, more than any revenge, more than any professional triumph, more than any financial milestone, was the true victory. And 2 years to the day after Ethan had cruelly dismissed me from his life with those words, "No one will want you," I stood at the podium of the grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton, accepting the Influencer of the Year award at the annual Wellness Marketing Summit. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same event where I had once given my keynote, emerging from Ethan's shadow, was now honoring me with their highest recognition. The audience, filled with industry leaders, clients, competitors, and colleagues, applauded as I took my place at the microphone. "Thank you for this honor," I began, looking out at the sea of faces. 2 years ago, I was at a crossroads. A personal and professional crisis had forced me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about myself, about business, about success. I paused, remembering those dark days, the pain that had eventually forged me into the woman I now was. That crisis turned out to be the greatest gift of my life. It taught me that authentic success isn't measured by the size of your client list or the figure in your bank account, though those things are certainly nice. A gentle ripple of laughter moved through the audience. True success comes from alignment, when your work reflects your deepest values, when your business practices match your public promises, when your growth serves something larger than yourself. I gestured to the Zenith team seated at tables near the front. That's what we've built at Zenith. Not just a consultancy, but a movement toward marketing that serves truth rather than obscuring it. As I continued my acceptance speech, I caught sight of a familiar face near the back of the room. Ethan was there, watching as I received an award he had once coveted for himself. His expression was unreadable from this distance, but his presence spoke volumes. He had come to witness this moment, perhaps to remind himself that he had once been part of my story, perhaps to measure his own journey against mine. I didn't acknowledge him. This moment wasn't about Ethan, or about proving him wrong, or about any kind of revenge. It was about celebrating what Zenith had accomplished, what I had become not in spite of that painful breakup, but because of how I had chosen to respond to it. After the ceremony, as I mingled with well-wishers and colleagues, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Natalie, elegant in a sustainable silk dress from one of her fashion clients, her own award for Rising Star Consultancy clutched in her hand. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "No one deserves it more." "You too," I replied, genuinely pleased for her success. "Conscious style is making waves. I hear you just landed the Harrison Group account." She nodded, a proud smile lighting her features. "Just signed last week. They want a complete overhaul of their supply chain communications." She glanced over her shoulder, then leaned closer. "He's here, you know." I saw. "Does it bother you?" Her question was hesitant, curious. I considered it honestly before answering. "No, not anymore." "Does it bother you?" "Less than it used to." She sipped her champagne thoughtfully. "Sometimes I still get angry when I think about wasting 2 years of my life with him. But then I remember, those years gave me the push I needed to start my own business, to find out what I'm really capable of." "Then they weren't wasted," I told her. "Just invested differently than you planned." Natalie smiled. "That's a good way to look at it." She glanced at her watch. "I should make the rounds. I have potential clients to charm." With a quick hug, she moved away into the crowd, confident and poised, a far cry from the uncertain young woman who had once stood in Ethan's shadow. I was about to join my team at our table when a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Congratulations, Ava. Well deserved." I turned slowly, coming face to face with Ethan for the first time in nearly 2 years. He looked older, the lines around his eyes more pronounced, his once perfect appearance slightly frayed at the edges. Success had not settled as comfortably on his shoulders as he had once assumed it would. "Thank you, Ethan," I replied, my voice even, professional. "I'm surprised to see you here." He shrugged, a gesture I once would have found charming, but now recognized as a shield against vulnerability. "I was invited to speak on a panel, Digital Transformation in Wellness Communications." I nodded politely. "I'm sure it will be interesting." An awkward silence fell between us. Two people who had once shared everything, now reduced to stilted small talk at an industry event. "You proved me wrong," he said finally, his voice lower, meant only for me. "About everything." The words I had once longed to hear, now delivered too late to matter. I studied him, seeing beyond the practiced charm to the insecurity beneath, the man who could only feel powerful by making others feel small. "This isn't about you, Ethan," I said, not unkindly. "It never was. It's about the work, the impact, the value we create." He flinched slightly, as if my refusal to engage in the narrative he had constructed, where I had built my success as a response to his rejection, was itself a repudiation. "Your keynote 2 years ago changed the industry conversation," he said, trying a different approach. "I've adapted some of your authenticity principles in my own work. They're effective. They're not principles to be adapted, Ethan. They're values to be lived." I glanced toward my team, who were watching our interaction with barely concealed curiosity. If you'll excuse me, I should get back to my colleagues. As I turned to leave, he reached out as if to touch my arm, then thought better of it. Ava, wait. I've been wanting to tell you. He hesitated, seeming to struggle with words for perhaps the first time in his life. I'm sorry. For what I said? For how I treated you? I was wrong. 2 years ago, this apology would have meant everything. Now, it was simply an acknowledgement of a truth I had long since accepted. I know you were, I said quietly. I hope you've grown since then, for your sake, and for the sake of anyone who cares about you. He nodded, a flash of genuine regret crossing his features. I'm trying. It's harder than I expected. I felt a momentary pang of sympathy. Growth was difficult. Facing your own flaws was painful. I knew this firsthand. Worth it, though, I said, offering this small encouragement not because he deserved it, but because I refused to let bitterness define me. Good luck with your panel tomorrow. With that, I rejoined my team, accepting their congratulations, celebrating our collective success, immersing myself in the community I had built. When I glanced back toward where Ethan had been standing, he was gone, a footnote in my story rather than its defining chapter. Later that night, as I returned to my hotel suite, I found myself drawn to the balcony overlooking the city. The lights stretched out below me, mirroring the stars above, a vast tapestry of possibility. I thought about the journey of the past 2 years, from devastation to determination, from loss to creation, from being defined by someone else's cruel words to defining myself through my own actions. No one will want you, Ethan had said, delivering what he believed to be the ultimate rejection, the final word on my worth. How wrong he had been. I was wanted by clients who valued my expertise, by a team who believed in my vision, by friends who cherished my companionship, by a partner who loved me for exactly who I was. But more importantly, I had learned to want myself, to value my own voice, to trust my own judgment, to honor my own needs. The woman who had once collapsed in tears on Ethan's apartment floor would not recognize the woman I had become. Not because I was now successful or wealthy or influential, though I was all of those things, but because I had found a strength within myself that no external circumstance could shake, no cruel words could diminish. In the cruelest irony for Ethan, I had indeed become his sugar mama of sorts, not by supporting him financially as he had once supported me, but by creating a market shift that had forced him to adopt my approaches, to follow the path I had blazed, to live in a professional world increasingly shaped by the values I had championed. I smiled at the thought, not out of vindictiveness, but out of appreciation for life's unexpected symmetry. The journey that had begun with his casual cruelty had led me to a success beyond anything either of us could have imagined. As I turned from the balcony to prepare for bed, my phone buzzed with a notification. The Zenith Company Instagram had reached 100,000 followers, another milestone in our growth. No one will want you. The words had lost their power to hurt me. They had become instead the spark that had ignited the most transformative journey of my life. I had not just survived Ethan's rejection. I had not just proven him wrong. I had transcended the entire premise of his criticism, that my worth was determined by whether others wanted me. My worth was intrinsic. My success was earned. My future was limitless. And that realization, more than any revenge, was the true happy ending to this story. 3 years after Ethan told me no one would want me, I found myself sitting in my corner office on the 30th floor of the Adams Building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of the city where I had once felt so small, so unwanted. Now, Zenith Marketing occupied the entire floor, with a team of 25 full-time employees and a roster of clients that read like a who's who of the wellness industry. The journey from that broken woman on Ethan's apartment floor to the CEO of a 7-figure consultancy hadn't been easy. There had been sleepless nights, financial gambles, moments of doubt when his cruel words would echo in my mind, "No one will want you." But each small victory had silenced those echoes a little more, until they became nothing but a distant memory of a person I used to be. A knock on my office door pulled me from my reflections. Sophie, now my chief operating officer and still my closest friend, poked her head in. "Your 3 o'clock is here," she announced, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And you're not going to believe who it is." Before I could ask for clarification, she stepped aside, revealing a ghost from my past. Ethan Waters stood in my doorway, the confidence I remembered now tempered with something I never thought I'd see in him: hesitation. He looked different. The designer clothes were still there, but they hung on a frame that seemed somehow diminished. The cashmere jacket, not the one I had given him, this one was newer but already showing signs of wear, seemed to swallow him slightly. His once perfect hair was threaded with silver at the temples, but it was his eyes that showed the most change. The arrogance had been replaced by something harder to define. Weariness, perhaps, or resignation. "Hello, Ava," he said, his voice lacking the smooth authority I remembered. "Thanks for agreeing to see me." I hadn't, in fact, agreed to anything. My assistant had scheduled a meeting with a potential client from Waters Consulting, but Ethan's name had never been mentioned. Sophie's expression told me this wasn't an oversight but a deliberate omission on her part. She had wanted to give me the option of refusing, but also the opportunity for closure, or perhaps just the satisfaction of seeing him like this. "Ethan," I acknowledged, my voice calm and professional. "This is a surprise." Sophie raised an eyebrow, silently asking if I wanted her to stay. I gave a small shake of my head. Whatever Ethan was here for, I could handle it alone. "I'll be right outside if you need anything," she said pointedly, giving Ethan a look that contained 3 years' worth of protective fury before closing the door behind her. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please sit." He did, his movements lacking the easy confidence I remembered. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the weight of our shared history hanging in the air between us. I felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, not even satisfaction at seeing him diminished. Just a mild curiosity about what could possibly have brought him to my door after all this time. "You've done well for yourself?" he finally said, gesturing to the office around us. "Very well. Yes," I agreed simply. No false modesty, no gloating. Just acknowledgement of a fact we both knew to be true. He nodded, eyes dropping to his hands. "I need your help, Ava." 3 years ago, those words would have filled me with vindictive glee. Now they just made me tired. "What kind of help?" "My company is in trouble," he admitted, the words seeming to physically pain him. "The wellness division failed completely after Natalie left. I tried to pivot to tech marketing, but the authentic marketing approach I pioneered became industry standard, and your superficial tactics couldn't compete." I finished for him. A flash of the old Ethan, defensive, arrogant, crossed his face before it faded into resignation. "Essentially, yes. Why come to me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "There are plenty of consultants who could help you reorganize. Because you're the best," he said simply. "Everyone knows it. And because..." He hesitated, seeming to struggle with the words. "Because I owe you." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "You owe me? The $15,000 you loaned me to start my business?" he clarified, "plus interest." I've been thinking about it a lot lately. 3 years is a long time to suddenly develop a conscience, I observed. Ethan had the grace to look ashamed. "I know. I've been working on myself. Therapy, actually. Trying to understand why I treated you, the way I did." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. This vulnerable, self-aware version of Ethan was so far removed from the man I had known that I hardly knew how to respond. "The thing is," he continued, "I don't just want to repay the money. I want to make amends. And ... He took a deep breath. "I need a job, Ava." For a moment, I was certain I had misheard him. "A job?" "At Zenith. In any capacity you think appropriate. I've had to downsize my company to almost nothing. Most of my clients have left. My reputation... Well, let's just say your approach to business has made mine look increasingly hollow." The irony was so perfect it almost seemed scripted. Ethan Waters, who had once laughed that no one would want me, was now asking me to want him, to find value in him, to give him a chance. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You want me to hire you after you took my money, cheated on me, cruelly discarded me, and told me no one would ever want me?" He winced at the recitation of his sins. "When you put it like that? How else should I put it?" My tone wasn't angry, just matter of fact. "That's what happened, Ethan." "Yes," he agreed quietly. "That's what happened. And there's no excuse for it." I studied him, trying to discern if this remorse was genuine or just another manipulation. There had been a time when I could read his expressions like a book I'd memorized. Now he was a stranger to me, familiar in appearance but unknown in essence. "Why would I hire you?" I asked directly. "What value could you possibly bring to Zenith that would outweigh our history?" For the first time since he'd entered my office, a flicker of the old Ethan, confident, strategic, returned to his expression. "Because despite everything, I'm good at what I do," he said. "I understand client psychology. I know how to close deals." And I have contacts in sectors you haven't yet penetrated: tech, finance, entertainment. He leaned forward slightly. You've built something incredible here, Ava. Something authentic and valuable. But there are still markets where your approach could make an impact, markets I know intimately. I had to admit his pitch was compelling. Zenith had dominated the wellness sector, but had only recently begun exploring expansion into other industries. Having someone with established connections in those sectors could accelerate our growth significantly. But was it worth the potential disruption to the company culture I had worked so hard to build? The awkwardness of having my ex-boyfriend, the man who had broken my heart and dismissed my worth, working under me? The questions it would raise with my team, my clients, the industry at large? I realized with a start that I was actually considering it, not out of vengeance or a desire to lord my success over him, but as a genuine business decision. The ultimate proof that I had moved beyond our history was that I could evaluate his proposal on its merits alone. If, and this is a very big if, I were to consider this, I said carefully, it would be as a probationary consultant only. No guaranteed position, no title, no corner office. You would have to prove your value like anyone else. Relief flooded his features. That's more than fair. And, I continued, you would report directly to Sophie. His relief faltered slightly. We both knew Sophie had never liked him, even before our breakup, and had become fiercely protective of me since then. I understand, he said after a moment. Whatever conditions you set, I accept them. I nodded slowly, still not entirely convinced this was a good idea. I'll need to discuss this with my leadership team. This isn't just my decision to make. Zenith has grown beyond me. Something like respect flickered in his eyes at that statement. Of course. I appreciate you even considering it, Ava. More than you know. As he stood to leave, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope, placing it carefully on my desk. This is the first installment on what I owe you. It's not the full amount yet, but it's a start. I didn't reach for the envelope. Why now, Ethan? After 3 years, why come to me now? He paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. Because I finally understand what I threw away, he said quietly. Not just a relationship, but a partnership with someone extraordinary. Someone who saw value and potential where I only saw opportunity for exploitation. He offered a sad smile. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too selfish to see it. By the time I did, it was too late. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with an envelope of money and thoughts I never expected to have again. I sat motionless for several minutes after he left, trying to process what had just happened. The universe had a twisted sense of humor sometimes. 3 years ago, I had fantasized about Ethan realizing what he had lost, coming to me for help, being forced to acknowledge my success. But in those fantasies, I had always imagined feeling triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I felt nothing particularly dramatic. No surge of vindictive pleasure, no residual anger, not even much satisfaction. Just a calm assessment of a business proposition and mild curiosity about this apparently changed man. Sophie burst in as soon as Ethan was safely out of the building. Well, what did that snake want? I gestured to the chair he had vacated. Sit down, Soph. This is going to take some explaining. Her expression shifted from indignation to disbelief as I recounted Ethan's proposal. You can't seriously be considering this? She said when I had finished. After everything he did to you? I'm considering it purely as a business decision, I clarified. His connections in tech and finance could accelerate our expansion plans by months, maybe years. Sophie's eyes narrowed. So could hiring any number of other consultants who don't have a history of emotionally abusing our CEO. True, I acknowledged. But few would come with his level of experience or connections. I don't trust him, she stated flatly. People don't change that fundamentally. He's working an angle, I'm sure of it. I picked up the envelope he had left, opening it to find a cashier's check for $5,000 made out to me personally. A start on repaying what he owed, just as he'd said. Maybe, I conceded. But what angle could possibly benefit him more than just rebuilding his own company? Why subject himself to starting at the bottom of ours? Sophie frowned, considering this. I don't know yet, but I don't like it. Neither do I entirely, I admitted. That's why I told him any position would be probationary, and he'd report directly to you. A slow, slightly wicked smile spread across her face. To me? Well, that's different then. I couldn't help but laugh at her expression. Don't enjoy the prospect of making his life difficult too much, Soph. This is still just an idea I'm considering. Consider it with the whole leadership team, she advised, her expression turning serious again. This affects all of us, not just you." She was right, of course. The days when Zenith was just me working out of a tiny office were long gone. We now had a leadership team of 6, myself, Sophie, our creative director, finance director, strategy director, and client relations director. Major decisions were made collectively, a policy I had instituted specifically to avoid the kind of ego-driven leadership I had seen fail too many times in our industry. "I'll call a meeting for tomorrow morning," I decided. "We'll discuss it properly then." After Sophie left, I stared at the check in my hand, thinking about what it represented. Not just money, but an acknowledgement of a debt, both financial and moral. Was it enough? Could anything ever be enough to make up for the cruelty of those words, those actions? "No one will want you." The words had lost their power to hurt me years ago, but they still echoed occasionally, ghostly reminders of a vulnerable past self. Now, in the ultimate reversal, Ethan was the one hoping to be wanted. By me, by Zenith, by the industry that had increasingly embraced my authentic approach over his superficial tactics. I placed the check in my desk drawer. I would decide what to do with it later. First, I needed to consult with my team about whether Ethan Waters deserved a place at Zenith, not for his redemption, but for our growth. As I expected, the leadership team meeting the next morning was contentious. Opinions about bringing Ethan on as a consultant were sharply divided. His connections in tech could fast-track our expansion plans, argued Marcus, our strategy director. From a purely business perspective, it makes sense. But at what cost to company culture? Countered Layla, our creative director. "Everyone knows your history, Ava. Bringing him in sends a confusing message to the team." "I've reviewed his company financials," added Derek, our finance director. "Waters Consulting is on its last legs. He's desperate, which means we could dictate very favorable terms. Or it means he's looking for a lifeboat and doesn't care who he uses to stay afloat," Sophie pointed out. "I still don't trust his motivations." Rena, our client relations director, had been quietly listening to the debate. Now she spoke up. "What about our clients? How would they perceive this move?" It was a good question. Zenith's reputation was built on authenticity and values alignment. How would our clients react to us hiring someone whose approach had been the antithesis of ours? "We could position it as Ethan seeing the light," Marcus suggested. "A conversion narrative. Even the competition recognizes that Zenith's approach is the future of marketing. It could actually enhance our credibility." I had remained largely silent, letting my team hash out the pros and cons. Now all eyes turned to me expectantly. "I appreciate everyone's input," I said. "You've raised valid points on both sides. Here's what I propose. We bring Ethan on for a 3-month trial basis as a consultant only, with clearly defined deliverables focused on helping us establish connections in the tech sector. Sophie will serve as his direct supervisor, and he'll have no access to our proprietary methodologies or client information beyond what's necessary for his specific projects." I looked around the table, gauging reactions. This gives us the opportunity to benefit from his connections while limiting our exposure. If he proves valuable and trustworthy, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement at the end of the trial period. If not, we part ways, no harm done. There were nods around the table, even from Sophie, who still looked skeptical but willing to go along with the plan. "One more thing," I added. "I don't want anyone on the team to feel uncomfortable. So we'll be completely transparent about Ethan's role, his history with me, and the temporary nature of his position. No rumors, no speculation, just facts. That's why you're the boss," Layla said with a smile. "You always find the balanced approach." The meeting concluded with tentative agreement to move forward with the plan. I asked Derek to draft a consulting contract with appropriate non-disclosure and non-compete clauses, and Sophie to develop a specific project brief outlining Ethan's responsibilities and limitations. As everyone filed out, Sophie lingered behind. "You're sure about this?" she asked quietly. "On a personal level, I mean." I considered her question carefully. "I'm not doing this for personal reasons, not for revenge, not for closure, not to prove anything to him or myself. I'm doing it because it might benefit Zenith, and that's how I know I'm ready to work with him again. The personal baggage is just not relevant anymore." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You've come a long way from that night on my couch, crying over him." I smiled, remembering the broken woman I had been, how Sophie had held me together in those first dark days after the breakup. "We both have. You were living in that tiny apartment, and now you're COO of a 7-figure company, with a corner office almost as big as yours," she added with a grin. "Almost," I agreed. but yours has a better view. We shared a laugh, the moment of levity dispelling the tension that had lingered from discussing Ethan. Whatever happened with this consulting arrangement, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a team, a company, a support system that I had built myself, brick by brick, from the ruins of that devastating breakup. No one will want you. The words held no truth, no power. They never had, except what I had given them. And I had reclaimed that power, transformed it into something stronger than Ethan could ever have imagined when he casually destroyed what I had thought was my entire world. The following Monday, Ethan Waters began his probationary consulting position at Zenith Marketing. We had assigned him a small workspace in the open plan area, a deliberate choice to reinforce his temporary status, and Sophie had prepared a detailed briefing on his first project, identifying and establishing connections with potential tech clients. I had decided to maintain a professional distance, allowing Sophie to handle his day-to-day management, while I focused on our existing clients and broader company strategy. This wasn't avoidance, but a practical division of responsibilities. Still, I couldn't help noticing the ripple of curiosity that moved through the office when he arrived, the whispered conversations, the speculative glances between me and him. True to my word, I had sent a company-wide email the previous Friday, explaining Ethan's temporary role and briefly acknowledging our personal history. Some of you may know that Ethan and I have a prior connection, I had written. That history has no bearing on his current professional engagement with Zenith, which will be evaluated solely on the results he delivers for our expansion into the tech sector. Straightforward, honest, no drama, just as I had rebuilt my life and career. I was deep in preparation for a client presentation when a knock on my door interrupted my concentration. I looked up to find Natalie standing in my doorway, an expression of disbelief on her face. "Is it true?" she demanded without preamble. "You hired Ethan?" Natalie and I had maintained a cordial professional relationship since her departure from his company. Her own consultancy, Conscious Style Communications, had flourished in the sustainable fashion niche, and we occasionally collaborated on projects that bridged our areas of expertise. But we rarely discussed Ethan. As a temporary consultant only, I clarified, gesturing for her to come in and close the door. "How did you hear about it?" "Industry gossip travels fast," she said, taking a seat across from me, "especially when it's this juicy." "My phone has been blowing up since this morning," I sighed. Despite my efforts at transparency, I should have anticipated the rumor mill would go into overdrive. "It's a business decision, Natalie. He has connections in the tech sector that could help Zenith expand." She studied me with narrowed eyes. "And that's really all it is? No part of you is enjoying the role reversal? Having him dependent on you after what he did?" The question made me uncomfortable, not because it was inappropriate, but because it probed at emotions I wasn't sure I had fully examined. Was there a part of me, however small, that took satisfaction in Ethan's downfall and subsequent need for my help? If there was, I had buried it so deeply beneath professional considerations that I could honestly deny its influence on my decision-making. If I were motivated by revenge, I said carefully, I would have refused to see him when he showed up in my office. The most satisfying revenge would have been to deny him even the opportunity to ask for help. Natalie considered this, then nodded slowly. "Fair point. And I suppose if anyone can maintain professional boundaries with Ethan, it's you. You've certainly proven your resilience." Her expression softened slightly. "Just be careful, okay? He's at his most dangerous when he's desperate." "Sophie's supervising him directly," I assured her. "And he's on a short leash. 3 months, clearly defined deliverables, minimal access to company information." Natalie relaxed visibly at that. "Sophie supervising him is the most comforting thing you could have said. She'll make him walk the line." As if summoned by her name, Sophie appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but the Walker Tech team is here for their introductory meeting. And ... She hesitated, glancing at Natalie. "Ethan suggested he join since tech is his focus area." I considered this for a moment. Walker Tech was our first foray into the technology sector, a small but innovative company developing wellness-focused apps. Having Ethan in the meeting could provide valuable insights, but it would also be his first client interaction as a Zenith consultant. He can observe, I decided, but make it clear he's there to learn our approach, not to lead or contribute yet. Sophie nodded. "Already handled. I've prepped the Walker team too. They know he's a new consultant with us." After Sophie left, Natalie rose to go. "I should let you get to your meeting, but let's have dinner soon." I want to hear how this experiment goes. I agreed, and she left with a final warning look that spoke volumes about her continued distrust of Ethan. I couldn't blame her. She had experienced his manipulative nature firsthand, just as I had. The Walker Tech meeting went smoothly. True to instructions, Ethan observed quietly from the corner, taking notes and absorbing our approach. I was hyper-aware of his presence, of course, but found it easier to ignore than I had anticipated. 3 years had created a distance that allowed me to see him as just another professional in the room, not the man who had once held such power over my emotions. Afterward, as the team dispersed, Ethan approached me with a carefully neutral expression. "Thank you for allowing me to observe," he said formally. "Your approach with clients is different than I expected." "Different how?" I asked, curious despite myself. "More collaborative," he admitted. At Waters Consulting, I always positioned myself as the expert with all the answers. You positioned Zenith as a partner in discovering the answers. "Because that's what we are," I replied. "Authentic marketing isn't about imposing strategies on clients. It's about helping them uncover and articulate the authentic value they already offer." He nodded thoughtfully. "I have a lot to learn." The simple acknowledgement, devoid of defensiveness or false humility, surprised me. Perhaps therapy had changed him more than I had initially credited. "That's why you're here," I said, keeping my tone professionally encouraging. "Sophie has outlined your next steps?" "Yes," he confirmed. "Research potential tech sector targets, prepare briefing documents on their current marketing approaches and how they might benefit from Zenith's methodology." "Good. I look forward to reviewing your findings." As he turned to go, he paused. "Ava, thank you for this opportunity. I know I don't deserve it." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. "Prove me right for giving it to you," I said simply, neither accepting nor rejecting his gratitude. Over the next few weeks, a strange new rhythm established itself at Zenith. Ethan worked diligently under Sophie's watchful eye, producing thorough research on potential tech clients and gradually being allowed to participate more actively in strategy discussions. The initial curiosity from the team faded as they grew accustomed to his presence, and the industry gossip moved on to newer, juicier topics. What surprised me most was Ethan's apparent transformation. The arrogant, dismissive man who had once told me no one would want me seemed to have been replaced by someone humbler, more thoughtful, more willing to learn. He absorbed feedback without defensiveness, contributed ideas without trying to dominate discussions, and showed genuine interest in understanding Zenith's authentic marketing philosophy. "I don't trust it," Sophie declared during our weekly one-on-one meeting. "No one changes this much without an angle." "People can change," I pointed out, "especially after significant setbacks." She gave me a skeptical look. "You're not going soft on him, are you?" "Hardly," I assured her. "I'm just evaluating his work objectively. And so far, his work has been good. The connections he's helped us establish in the tech sector are valuable." This was undeniable. In just a month, Ethan had helped arrange meetings with 3 promising tech companies interested in Zenith's services. His knowledge of the sector and existing relationships had opened doors that might have taken us much longer to access otherwise. "Fine," Sophie conceded grudgingly. "His work has been adequate, but I still don't trust his motivations." I couldn't entirely disagree with her caution. Despite the evidence of Ethan's changed behavior, a part of me remained wary, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It seemed too neat, too convenient. The man who had once crushed my self-worth now humbly serving the company I had built from the ashes of that devastation. My wariness proved justified approximately 6 weeks into Ethan's consultancy. I was working late one evening, the office mostly empty except for a few dedicated team members wrapping up projects. As I prepared to leave, I realized I had left some client notes in the conference room after our last meeting. Making my way there, I was surprised to find the door slightly ajar, voices drifting out. One of those voices was unmistakably Ethan's. "Just need a little more time," he was saying. "I'm gaining their trust, getting access to more information." I froze outside the door, something cold settling in my stomach. "You promised results by now," came another voice, unfamiliar and male. "My investors are getting impatient. Either you deliver the Zenith methodology or the deal's off." "I'll have it," Ethan insisted. "Their client onboarding process, their assessment frameworks, their content development approach, it's all proprietary and valuable." "But Ava's cautious. She's limited my access." "That's your problem to solve, not mine," the other voice replied coldly. You said you could get inside, leverage your history with her to access their methodologies. That's what we're paying for. My hands curled into fists as realization dawned. Ethan hadn't come to me for redemption or out of desperation. This had been a calculated move to gain access to Zenith's proprietary approaches, the very methodologies that had made us industry leaders while his company floundered. I should have stormed in, confronted him on the spot. But something kept me rooted in place, listening, gathering information. I need 2 more weeks, Ethan was saying. They're sending me to the Carter Tech pitch meeting. That will give me access to the full presentation deck, including their strategic framework. 2 weeks. The other voice agreed reluctantly. Then we pull the plug if you don't deliver. I backed away silently, my mind racing. The Carter Tech pitch was indeed scheduled in 2 weeks, a major potential client that could establish Zenith firmly in the tech sector. And yes, we had recently decided to have Ethan join the pitch team, a sign of our growing trust in his contributions. Trust that had been entirely misplaced. I returned to my office, closed the door, and took several deep breaths to calm the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Anger, betrayal, but also a strange sense of validation. Sophie had been right to be suspicious. I had been right to limit his access, despite his seemingly genuine transformation. No one will want you, he had once told me. Now I understood. This wasn't about wanting to work for me, to learn from me. This was about wanting what I had built, wanting to steal it rather than earn it. The superficial changes in his behavior were just that, superficial, a means to an end. My first instinct was to fire him immediately, to call security and have him escorted from the building, his access revoked. But a cooler, more strategic part of my brain asserted itself. If I confronted him now, I would reveal that I knew about his plan. But if I waited, if I let him think he was succeeding, I could turn this betrayal into an opportunity. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with Sophie and our legal counsel, excluding the rest of the leadership team for now to contain the information. I knew it, Sophie hissed after I recounted what I had overheard. I knew he was playing us. Our lawyer, Elena, was more measured in her response. The good news is he hasn't obtained anything truly damaging yet, based on what you overheard. We've kept him away from our core methodologies, but he thinks the Carter Tech pitch will give him access, I pointed out. And normally it would, so we fire him, Sophie said decisively. Today, now, I shook my head. I have another idea. They listened intently as I outlined my plan. Instead of confronting Ethan or firing him, we would feed him carefully crafted misinformation. We would create a shadow version of our methodologies, plausible enough to pass casual inspection, but fundamentally flawed in ways that wouldn't become apparent until implemented. We let him steal our fake secrets, I explained. Let him deliver them to whoever he's working with. And then they implement a broken methodology that fails spectacularly, Sophie finished, a slow smile spreading across her face. While we continue to succeed with our actual approach, Elena looked concerned. This is risky. If they discover the deception before implementation, it could backfire. True, I acknowledged. But if we simply fire him, he'll just find another way to target us. This way we neutralize the threat permanently. Whoever wants our methodologies badly enough to plant a corporate spy will be too embarrassed to admit they were duped if the plan works. After further discussion, we agreed to proceed with caution. Elena would prepare documentation outlining the false methodologies. Sophie would ensure Ethan had access to these materials while continuing to restrict his access to our actual proprietary information. And I would maintain a normal professional relationship with him, giving no indication that we were aware of his true purpose. What about the Carter Tech pitch? Sophie asked. We can't risk losing a valuable client to protect our plan. We'll create 2 versions of the pitch, I decided. The real one for the actual presentation, and a decoy version for Ethan to steal. We'll tell the team there were concerns about the first approach and we've pivoted to a new strategy. The plan set in motion, we dispersed to our respective tasks. Over the next 2 weeks, we executed our counter-espionage with precision. Carefully crafted documents detailing a plausible but fundamentally flawed version of Zenith's methodology were strategically placed where Ethan could access them. The leadership team was brought into the loop, sworn to secrecy, and instructed to maintain normal interactions with him. I observed Ethan closely during this time, looking for signs of the manipulative person I had once known beneath the reformed facade he presented. Now that I was watching for it, I could see glimpses. The calculated way he asked certain questions, the carefully casual manner in which he lingered after meetings where confidential information might be discussed, the flash of triumph in his eyes when he believed he had gained access to something valuable. The Carter Tech pitch approached, and as planned, we created two versions, the real strategy we would present and the decoy version that contained elements of our false methodology. Ethan was given access to the decoy, told it was the final version, only to be informed the day before the presentation that we had decided to take a different approach, and handed an outline of the actual strategy he would need to follow during the meeting. The frustration that flickered across his face was subtle but unmistakable. He had already transmitted the decoy materials to whoever had planted him at Zenith, only to discover they were now obsolete. The day of the Carter Tech pitch arrived. Our team delivered a flawless presentation, securing the client with a 2-year contract that would establish Zenith firmly in the tech sector. Ethan played his part perfectly, showing no outward sign of the duplicity I now knew motivated his every action. As we celebrated the successful pitch back at the office, I watched him from across the room, accepting congratulations from team members who had no idea of his true nature. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a toast, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. I returned the gesture, my own smile equally hollow. The countdown had begun. Somewhere, someone was reviewing the stolen materials, preparing to implement what they believed was Zenith's secret to success. And when they did, when the flaws in the false methodology revealed themselves, Ethan's betrayal would bear bitter fruit. 3 days later, Ethan requested a meeting with me. He arrived at my office looking somewhat tense but masking it with his usual charm. "I wanted to discuss my future at Zenith," he began. "My 3-month trial period is nearly up." "So it is," I agreed neutrally. "Sophie will be preparing a formal evaluation soon." "I was hoping to get your thoughts directly," he pressed. "I feel I've contributed significantly, especially with Carter Tech. I'd like to discuss a more permanent position." The audacity was almost admirable. He was planning to steal our methodology, deliver it to a competitor, and then continue working at Zenith as if nothing had happened. "You have certainly helped establish valuable connections," I acknowledged. "But as you know, any permanent position would require the full support of the leadership team. We'll need to review your overall contribution and fit with our company culture." A flash of impatience crossed his features before he smoothed it away. "Of course. I just thought, given our history, we might speak more candidly. Our history is precisely why we need to be especially careful about process, don't you think?" I countered, maintaining a pleasant, professional tone. I wouldn't want anyone to think I was showing favoritism. He conceded the point with a nod, though I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was running out of time with his co-conspirators, needed to secure his position or extract the last pieces of information he sought. "There is one thing I've been curious about," he said, shifting tactics. "The Carter Tech approach was quite different from the initial strategy I saw. What prompted the change?" I had prepared for this question. Client research revealed some specific needs that required a different approach. It's one of Zenith's strengths. We're not wedded to a one-size-fits-all methodology. "Unlike Waters Consulting," he said with a self-deprecating smile, "I'm learning that flexibility is valuable." "Indeed," I agreed, watching him carefully. "The ability to adapt is essential, as is the ability to recognize when an approach is fundamentally flawed." Something in my tone must have alerted him, because he studied me more intently. "What do you mean?" "Just that not every strategy works in every context," I said smoothly. "What appears successful in theory can fail catastrophically in practice if the underlying assumptions are wrong." For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of unease in his expression, quickly masked. "That's why testing is important," he agreed. "Validating approaches before full implementation." "Exactly," I smiled. "A lesson some learn the hard way." He left shortly after, and I knew he would be contacting his co-conspirators, perhaps warning them to proceed with caution, but it would be too late. If my assessment of the situation was correct, they had already begun implementing the flawed methodology, eager to replicate Zenith's success. All we had to do now was wait. The fallout began approximately 3 weeks later. Industry channels began buzzing about Pinnacle Strategies, a mid-sized marketing firm known for aggressive growth tactics, experiencing a series of spectacular client losses. Their newest offering, a revolutionary approach to authentic marketing, had apparently resulted in campaigns that not only failed to resonate with target audiences, but actively damaged client brands. I received confirmation of my suspicions when Lauren Diaz, our first major client from Pure Intentions, called me directly. "Ava, do you know anything about Pinnacle Strategies?" she asked without preamble. "They approached us claiming to offer Zenith-style authentic marketing at lower rates, used very similar language to your methodology, but when we let them run a test campaign, it was a disaster. They claimed to offer our approach?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Not explicitly, but the implication was clear," Lauren confirmed. "They even had materials that looked remarkably similar to your client onboarding documents. I thought you should know. It seems like they might be trying to trade on your reputation." I thanked her for the information, assuring her that we would look into it. After hanging up, I called Sophie into my office to share the news. "It's working," she said with grim satisfaction. "The false methodology is failing exactly as we predicted. And taking Pinnacle's reputation down with it," I added. "I've received 3 other calls this morning from industry contacts reporting similar stories." The next day, an article appeared in Marketing Weekly detailing Pinnacle's authentic marketing fiasco. Several high-profile clients had publicly severed ties with the firm, citing campaign strategies that felt manipulative rather than authentic. Despite promises to the contrary, Ethan was noticeably absent from the office that day. And the next? On the 3rd day, Sophie received an email from him claiming a family emergency required his immediate attention and indefinite leave. A transparent excuse to distance himself from what was unfolding. "Should we officially terminate his contract?" Sophie asked when she showed me the email. I considered our options. "Not yet. Let's let this play out a little longer. I want to see where he lands." As it turned out, I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, as the Pinnacle Strategies debacle continued to unfold, I received a visit from an unexpected quarter. Marcus appeared in my doorway, his expression unusually serious. "There's someone here to see you." James Reynolds, CEO of Pinnacle Strategies. I raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Send him in." Reynolds was a tall, imposing man in his 50s, the type who commanded rooms through sheer force of personality. But today, he entered my office with the cautious step of someone approaching a potentially hostile animal. "Ms. Chen," he said formally. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "Mr. Reynolds," I acknowledged, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "What brings you to Zenith?" He sat heavily, the weight of his company's recent failures evident in the new lines on his face. "I think you know why I'm here. Ethan Waters." I maintained a neutral expression. "What about him?" "He sold us what he claimed was Zenith's proprietary methodology," Reynolds said bluntly. "Convinced me it was worth a small fortune and would revolutionize our approach to the wellness sector." "And you believed him?" I asked, allowing just a hint of incredulity to color my tone. Reynolds had the grace to look embarrassed. "He was persuasive and desperate, said you had forced him out of his own company, that he wanted revenge. It appealed to my less noble instincts." "I see," I said calmly. "And now that this methodology has failed spectacularly, you're here because I need to know if you did this deliberately," he said, meeting my gaze directly. "If you fed him false information knowing he would bring it to me?" It was a direct question that deserved a direct answer. "Yes." Reynolds didn't seem surprised, merely nodded slowly. "I thought as much. It was too perfectly flawed, convincing on the surface, but fundamentally unsound when implemented. Corporate espionage is a serious matter, Mr. Reynolds," I said, my voice hardening slightly, "as is attempting to steal proprietary methodologies that my team has spent years developing." "I know," he acknowledged. "I made a serious error in judgment, one that has cost my company millions and our reputation even more." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Why come to me now? Why admit your role?" "Because I need your help," he said simply. "Not to save my company. That ship has sailed. But to salvage something from this disaster. To understand what real authentic marketing is, not the sabotaged version Waters sold us." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was yet another person who had tried to undermine me, now seeking my help. The universe did have a perverse sense of humor. "That's a significant request considering the circumstances," I observed. "I know," Reynolds agreed, "and I'm prepared to compensate you appropriately for your expertise. But more importantly, I can offer you information." "What kind of information?" "About Waters. About who else he approached with your supposed methodology. About his plans now that this scheme has failed. Now he had my attention." "Go on." "He's not just running from Pinnacle's failure," Reynolds revealed. "He's already approached Meridian Group with the same pitch. Told them our failure was due to poor implementation, not flawed methodology. Meridian Group was one of the largest marketing conglomerates in the country. If they implemented the false methodology on their scale, the damage could be exponentially worse than what Pinnacle had experienced. When? I asked sharply. Meeting set for tomorrow, Reynolds said. I only know because my former CMO is now with Meridian. She recognized the pitch from our own disaster and reached out to warn me. I processed this information quickly. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mr. Reynolds. As for your request for help, I'll need to consider it carefully. He nodded, rising to leave. I understand. For what it's worth, Ms. Chen, I admire how you handled this. Could have exposed us publicly, ruined us completely. Instead, you let us fail naturally and learn our lesson. The lesson being? I asked, curious about his takeaway. That there are no shortcuts to authentic success, he said simply. Something I should have known already. After Reynolds left, I immediately called an emergency leadership team meeting. This new development required quick action if we wanted to prevent Ethan from causing further industry chaos with our false methodology. We need to warn Meridian, Marcus argued once I had explained the situation. Professional courtesy, if nothing else. But if we do, we reveal that we deliberately created a false methodology, Layla pointed out. That could backfire legally. Not necessarily, Elena countered. We created internal documents that were stolen. We had no obligation to make them accurate for the benefit of corporate spies. The discussion continued, weighing options and potential consequences. Finally, I made my decision. We'll approach this directly but carefully, I said. I'll contact Meridian's CEO personally, explain that a former temporary consultant may be approaching them with what he claims is our methodology, and advise caution. No admission that we created false documentation, just concern about potential misrepresentation of our approach. The team agreed this was the most prudent course. After the meeting, I made the call to Meridian's CEO, a woman I had met at several industry events but never worked with directly. This is a concerning allegation, Ms. Chen, she said after hearing me out. Mr. Waters has indeed approached us with what he described as a revolutionary methodology. I thought you should know that he was terminated from his consulting role with Zenith for confidentiality violations, I said carefully. Whatever he's offering may not be what it appears. Understood, she replied. We'll proceed with appropriate caution. Thank you for the professional courtesy. With Meridian warned, I turned my attention to the final loose end, Ethan himself. He had disappeared from Zenith without formal resignation, was apparently still shopping the false methodology around despite its catastrophic failure at Pinnacle, and represented an ongoing risk to both our reputation and the broader industry. The opportunity to address this came sooner than expected. The evening after my call to Meridian, as I was working late in my office, my assistant informed me that Ethan was in the lobby, insisting on seeing me. Send him up, I decided. But please alert security to remain on standby. When Ethan entered my office minutes later, he looked nothing like the polished consultant who had worked at Zenith for the past 3 months. His clothes were rumpled, his expression haggard, his movements tense. You knew, he said without preamble. You knew all along what I was doing, and you fed me false information. I regarded him calmly. Yes. That single word confirmation seemed to deflate him completely. He sank into the chair across from my desk, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Meridian canceled our meeting, he said. Said they'd received concerning information about my business practices. That was you, wasn't it? I simply informed them of the facts, I replied, that you were terminated from Zenith for confidentiality violations. I wasn't terminated, he protested. I left because Pinnacle's implementation of your stolen methodology was failing spectacularly, I finished for him. Yes, we're aware. Your family emergency excuse didn't hold up to even minimal scrutiny. He stared at me, a mixture of anger and something like grudging respect in his expression. How long did you know? About what I was doing? Almost from the beginning, I said. You're not as subtle as you think, Ethan. You never were. The materials I took, he said slowly. They were all fake? Deliberately flawed, carefully constructed to appear legitimate while containing fatal flaws that would only become apparent during implementation, I confirmed. A bit like your apology and redemption story when you first came to me for a job. Ethan winced at the comparison. That's ruthlessly elegant. I learned from the best, I said pointedly. You taught me a lot about ruthlessness, Ethan. He fell silent for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had happened. So what now? You press charges? Sue me for corporate espionage? I could, I acknowledged. The evidence is substantial. James Reynolds has already admitted to paying you for what he believed was stolen proprietary information. Fear flashed across his face. Reynolds came to you? This morning. He was quite forthcoming about your arrangement. Ethan slumped further in his chair. I'm finished, aren't I? In this industry, at least. That depends, I said, leaning forward slightly. On what you do next. Hope flickered briefly in his eyes. What do you mean? You have a choice, Ethan. You can continue down this path, trying to sell stolen methodologies, burning bridges, damaging not just your reputation but potentially entire companies who trust your deceptions. Or you can make a clean break. And do what? He asked, a trace of his old bitterness returning. Start over at 43 in a new industry? With no references, no reputation? Perhaps, I said. Or perhaps there's a third option. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. What kind of option? Pinnacle Strategies is in chaos. They've lost major clients, their reputation is in tatters, and James Reynolds is looking for an exit strategy before the company collapses completely. And, Ethan prompted, clearly not seeing where I was going with this. And they need someone who understands what went wrong and how to fix it. Someone who can help them rebuild with a genuinely authentic approach. Understanding dawned on his face. You want me to go back to Pinnacle? To clean up the mess I created? With supervision? I clarified. Zenith would provide consulting services to Pinnacle during the transition. You would implement our actual methodology, which you would finally learn correctly, under our guidance. He stared at me in disbelief. Why would you help me after what I tried to do? Why would you help Pinnacle? Because the alternative is watching both you and Pinnacle continue to damage the industry with desperate tactics, I said simply. This way, Pinnacle becomes a case study in redemption rather than failure. You get a chance to genuinely learn the approach you tried to steal. And Zenith expands its consulting portfolio. A business decision, Ethan concluded. Not forgiveness. Exactly, I confirmed. I'm not offering absolution, Ethan. I'm offering a pragmatic solution that benefits all parties involved. He was silent for a long moment, considering the proposal. What about legal consequences? Will Reynolds press charges? He's more concerned with saving what's left of his company than pursuing legal action that would only generate more negative publicity, I said. If you agree to this arrangement, I believe he would consider it sufficient atonement. Ethan nodded slowly, the reality of his situation and the lifeline I was offering becoming clear to him. I don't deserve this chance, he said finally. I know that. No, I agreed. You don't, but this isn't about what you deserve. It's about what serves the greater good. The greater good? He repeated, a trace of his old cynicism surfacing. Since when do you make business decisions based on the greater good? Since always, I said firmly. That's what authentic marketing is about, Ethan. Creating value, not just extracting it. Serving truth, not just profit. It's what you never understood, what you tried to reduce to a formula you could steal. He had the grace to look ashamed. And if I agree to this arrangement, what's to stop me from trying to steal your real methodology once I have access to it? Two things, I said. First, a legal agreement so ironclad that violation would result in financial penalties that would bankrupt you for life. And second, the simple fact that our methodology isn't actually a secret formula you can steal. His brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? I mean that authentic marketing isn't a trick or a technique or a proprietary process, I explained. It's a philosophy, an approach, a way of thinking about the relationship between brands and customers. You can learn it, practice it, teach it, but you can't steal it like a piece of code. That's what you never understood. The realization seemed to genuinely surprise him. So the methodology I thought I was stealing was never the source of Zenith's success in the first place, I confirmed. It was always about the values behind it, the commitment to authenticity at every level. Ethan sat back, processing this revelation. I've been chasing the wrong thing all along, haven't I? Yes, I said simply. You have. He looked at me then with new eyes, seeing perhaps for the first time the person I had become, rather than the woman he had once dismissed so cruelly. No one will want you, he murmured, repeating those words that had once shattered my world. I really believed that when I said it. I couldn't imagine anyone seeing your value when I didn't. That was your limitation, I said quietly. Not mine. He nodded slowly. I see that now. After a moment's reflection, he straightened in his chair. I accept your proposal. I'll work with Pinnacle under Zenith's supervision, implement the real methodology, try to undo some of the damage I've caused. I'll have Elena draw up the agreements, I said, rising to indicate our meeting was concluded. You'll start next week. As he stood to leave, he hesitated, seeming to wrestle with something. Ava, I am sorry, not just for the corporate espionage, for everything, for how I treated you 3 years ago, for the things I said. You didn't deserve any of it. I studied him, trying to gauge the sincerity of his apology. It seemed genuine, but then, so had his initial approach for a job at Zenith. The difference was that now, it didn't matter to me either way. His opinion, his regret, his approval or disapproval, none of it held any power over me anymore. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. I hope you mean it. Not for my sake, but for yours. His brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? I mean that I forgave you a long time ago, Ethan, I explained. Not because you deserved forgiveness, but because holding on to that pain was limiting me. My success, my happiness, my worth, none of it depends on your recognition anymore. It never did. He absorbed this, a mixture of emotions playing across his face. You've changed, he said finally. Yes, I agreed. So have you, though perhaps not as fundamentally as you pretended. I'm trying, he said quietly, for what it's worth. Then prove it, I said simply. Not with words or apologies, but with actions. With how you approach this opportunity at Pinnacle. With how you treat people going forward. He nodded, a new determination in his expression. I will. As he left my office, I felt a profound sense of closure. Not because he had apologized or acknowledged his wrongdoing, but because I had faced him at his most desperate and manipulative, and dealt with him from a position of strength and clarity, without being dragged back into old patterns of hurt and resentment. The woman he had dismissed as unwanted had not only built a thriving business, but had become someone with the power to offer him a second chance, not out of sentimentality or weakness, but from a position of such security that his betrayal was merely a business problem to be solved, rather than an emotional wound to be nursed. In the most ironic twist of all, Ethan would now be implementing Zenith's authentic marketing philosophy at Pinnacle under our supervision, essentially becoming an extension of the company he had tried to undermine. His salary would be partially funded by consulting fees paid to Zenith. In a very real sense, I had become what the universe's perverse sense of humor might call his sugar mama, the financial benefactor enabling his continued career after his own had collapsed. No one will want you, he had said. But he had been wrong. Clients wanted me. The industry wanted me. My team wanted me. And now, in the ultimate irony, even Ethan needed me. My forgiveness, my help, my expertise, my blessing to continue in the industry he had once dominated. The circle was complete. Not with vengeance, but with something far more powerful, the quiet triumph of becoming someone whose value was undeniable, even to the person who had once been blind to it. As I turned back to my work, I smiled at the thought of what lay ahead. Zenith was expanding into new sectors, our authentic approach reshaping the industry standard. The false methodology debacle had only enhanced our reputation as the real deal amid imitators. And I had finally, completely exorcised the ghost of those cruel words that had once defined my darkest hour. No one will want you. 5 simple words that had once destroyed me. 5 simple words that had ultimately propelled me toward becoming someone even their speaker now admired. 5 simple words that had lost all power to hurt me, transformed instead into the ironic epitaph for a chapter of my life now firmly closed. I picked up the phone to call Sophie and share the outcome of my meeting with Ethan. There was work to be done, agreements to draft, a new chapter of Zenith's growth to plan. The future beckoned, bright with possibility and unburdened by the past. No one will want you? I had proven those words wrong in the most complete way possible. And the journey had only just begun.